Minus 15.
Respect all, fear none.
Into the upper deck.
Intensity is not a curfew.
Oh, mercy.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
From inside the warehouse at Oriole Park at Camden Yards, it is the MASN All Access Podcast, brought to you by Marymount University. Visit MarymountSaints.com to learn more about our student-athletes and programs today. Paul Mancano, Bobby Blanco, as always, back in the web studio for now. Of course, we will be in San Diego starting on Saturday for the winter meetings. That is going to be an exciting week, mostly because of the weather, Bobby.
Yeah, and we're not even going to enjoy the weather because we'll be inside the convention center the entire time. But yeah, going to winter meetings, it'll be a lot of fun. We'll be doing live shows daily starting Monday through Wednesday. Of course, covering the Rule 5 draft on Thursday morning as well before the mad rush at the airport for all the flights home. It might be a quiet week until that Thursday morning for the Orioles, but still, it's always an exciting week. You never know what's going to happen. Just when you think a team's going to be quiet throughout the whole week, they drop a bombshell on you on Wednesday night.
And it should be a more active offseason free agency in general than it was last year, I think, at this point. At least a quicker one than there was last year. We already saw, Zach Wheeler just signed within the last few minutes with the Phillies. We've seen Cole Hamels signed earlier today with the Braves. The Braves, somebody tell the Braves that they have time to do this. There's no deadline to get this done. They have been the most active team we've seen in years.
Yeah, and we just finished up our national side of the podcast, which, of course, are now split. So if you don't want a Nationals podcast, make sure you're following MASN All Access Podcast Orioles on all platforms. But the NL East seems to be like, oh, shoot, they won the World Series. We need to get moving. So everyone's making moves. The Phillies and the Braves are trying to compete with them. And if you just love baseball, it's an exciting time of year. Yeah. I'm glad it's moving forward, like you said, because last year and the year before that, it seemed like it used to drag on, especially with the Machado and Harper free agency last season. I'm glad to see it moving. Hopefully that means next week is a little more eventful and, we see some moves happen and maybe some big trades too.
Yeah, and as Bobby mentioned, we have shows Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and then full coverage on Thursday of the Rule 5 draft. Always good to go down and get some perspective. Rockabaka will be there. We'll have Mike Elias on set at some point. We'll have Sig Mejdal on set at some point. We'll have Brandon Hyde on set at some point. So you'll get to hear from the Orioles brass, and you'll get to hear from some national pundits as well. Kind of discuss the state of the Orioles and give their perspective because, look, the Orioles kind of fly under the radar during this offseason, which we all expected to be quiet. They don't get a whole lot of buzz in terms of the national media, but you do want to hear some inside stuff on what they're doing and get some other perspective, and we'll bring that to you.
We want to see because we know how everyone here views the Orioles right now. Obviously going through a rebuild and trying to gain assets and trade off assets that they already have, trying to get young talent into the system. Mike Elias has always said we need to revamp the whole minor league system from the core. But how do the national pundits view this year? How do some of the best minor league guys who know the minor league system for every team in and out, how do they view how the Orioles' approach is occurring so far this offseason? That'll be interesting to see as well because we saw last year the big news was, Mike Elias had just been hired, and this is also coming up on the anniversary that they hired Brandon Hyde. But the Orioles, this past season, the Orioles farm system jumped up in the rankings for the first time in a long time, and I think reached number 10 in some rankings. So that's exciting too. And so the way the minor league systems, their teams fared this season. Obviously, so many great stories. We were there throughout the whole season, and so many great teams. Now, how does the rest of the baseball world view this minor league system and some of the top prospects that they have? Your Ryan Mountcastles, your Ryan McKenna's possibly, Grayson Rodriguez, obviously Adley Rutschman. How do they view this team right now, year one under Mike Elias?
Well, we know how some teams viewed Jonathan Villar. He was dealt. That is the big news of the week, of course. Obviously, there was the deadline Monday night for arbitration-eligible players to be tendered or non-tendered by their teams. The Orioles placed Jonathan Villar on outright waivers on Friday. We knew that. So he was pretty much gone no matter what, regardless. Yeah. If he was not going to be traded during that 72-hour, 3-day window, he was going to be non-tendered a contract. Now, the reason that he was placed on waivers and the reason that he was not a fit for 2020 was in no way because of his production. I think that's something that, Orioles fans might worry about because he was incredibly productive for them in 2019. Played all 162, which is pretty impressive for a rebuilding team. Stayed healthy. Finished in the top 3 in the Orioles in batting average, homers, RBIs, stolen bases, of course, had 40. Doubles, OPS, just about every major category. He was one of the 3 best Orioles, if not the best Oriole, in 2019. So he was incredibly productive. The problem was he was coming with a $10 million price tag.
Yeah.
That was just not going to be met. And it was, look, the fact that, for those who might worry about the fact or dislike the fact that the Orioles were not willing to pay that $10 million, it shows you not too many other teams were willing to pay that either.
Right.
Teams that were good, that are contending teams, if they're avoiding paying $10 million for Jonathan Villar, then of course the Orioles would also avoid that as well.
Right. They kind of got this deal done at the buzzer because, like you said, it was right before the deadline to tender contracts. Otherwise, he would have become a straight-out free agent. And good on Michael Elias for at least getting something. You didn't want to just let him walk. If there was a deal in place, get something back. It was a low single-A ball reliever, we'll get to in a moment. But, yeah, $10 million, MLB trade rumors projected him at a $10.4 million salary for 2020. He'll be a free agent after next season. For a rebuilding club, yes, it's a thank you for your service. I mean, you did great. And also, Jonathan Villar didn't come here. Michael Elias didn't bring him in. He was under the previous regime, the Jonathan Scope trade. So, Michael Elias had no real ties to him. He probably definitely said, thank you. You were fantastic this year. You earned your right to go get that $10+ million. You're just not going to get it from us. And, we talked about all season long how the Orioles were an opportunity for players looking to get, rejuvenate their career or get that pay bump. Jonathan Villar took that opportunity, ran with it. He's going to earn his money, $10.4 million around that area in arbitration with the Marlins. And it just wasn't going to come here. It's a good on you. Thank you for your service. Good, best luck in the future type deal.
And there just was, I want to reiterate just kind of the idea of this guy clearly was not in high demand around baseball.
Right.
And that does not diminish his accomplishments for the Orioles in 2019. But if he were, he probably would have been dealt at the deadline to a team like the Cubs that were reportedly interested, to a team that was in the playoff hunt. He was out there for the league to have, and nobody really jumped at it. Only the other rebuilding Marlins were the team that really jumped at that opportunity. Teams are all kind of getting smarter about this stuff. They're getting generally, I wouldn't say cheaper, but they're more careful, more guarded about where they spend their money. And VR just did not seem to fit into a lot of teams' plans. So it's not just the Orioles that, may not have valued this guy highly. He clearly was not in high demand around the league. So this was the fact that they were able to get something in addition to getting the $10 million off their books. The fact that they were able to get a player back pretty much regardless of the level of player, and we'll get to Easton Lucas, but is just kind of is a win considering the entire league knew he was not going to be an Oriole for 3 days from the time that he was placed on waivers on Friday.
Yeah, like I said, it's important that they got something. I mean, Michael Elias, again, is just trying to, fill this farm system with talent. Who doesn't matter if this guy, Lucas, pans out or not, give him a shot. You can't. It's better to get something in return for VR than just let him walk because, who knows? He might turn out to be a pretty solid ball player down the line. He's a young guy, again, a single-A pitcher, but just to let him walk when there was an opportunity to trade him doesn't make sense for a team that is trying to add more talent to this farm system.
Yeah.
And Mark Kabako had this morning on MASNsports.com talking about the Orioles trade approach this offseason. It's going to be for low-level minor leaguers, and that's what they want. They want to start at Del Mar, the Gulf Coast League, Salisbury, and down in Aberdeen, and try to get young talent from the ground up, so they kind of can evaluate their own people and the players that they want to bring in.
Yeah.
So they obviously saw some value in Easton Lucas that give him a shot. It's just all about adding young talent any way you can at this point, and they finally found a trading partner for Villar at the end.
And the other thing to think about, I mean, I don't want to sound all one-sided or homerish by any stretch, but he was going to be a free agent after 2020. He's approaching 30. It just did not make a whole lot of sense.
Well, I don't want to see what I mean, there's, again, no offense to Jonathan Villar, but I don't know what's the Marlins plan for him. You know,
Right,
like
what's the upside?
Like
Yeah.
you mentioned, they're kind of in the same boat, but no pun intended, as the Orioles, in that they're rebuilding, they're looking for young talent. What's the upside in paying $10 million for Villar for basically 1 year, unless they think they can trade him at the deadline?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is that
I was kind of surprised when I saw it was the Marlins was the trading partner.
That's pretty much the only upside that you can think of for the Orioles
Right.
is you get another productive season from him, sure, but that's not the goal right now. Is he's not going to, like Rock said on the blog several times, he's not going to be the missing piece of this. He's not going to make this team able to contend just by himself.
Right.
So the only upside that you can really think of is twofold. One, that you were able to hold on to him and trade him at the deadline, which I guess so, but then you're getting less production from him because you're only getting him for a team that would be trading for him would only be getting him for half a season.
Right.
So your return there
Also
might be
pending
less.
free agent.
And a pending free agent. So you would maybe have a better chance of re-signing him after 2020 if you wanted to go that route. But that's not a whole lot of upside.
No.
That's not. Because if they are wanting to spend in the 2020, 2021 next offseason, a year from now, they can still go out and sign a Jonathan Villar. They can go out and sign pretty much whomever they want. Maybe they want to spend more money on a different guy at that point. Maybe they think they're closer at that point. There's not a whole lot of upside to just carrying him for a year at his salary, knowing that you're not going to contend. And frankly, at some level, he could be holding a spot where a younger guy might be able to take that spot from him.
Right. And this is kind of what I'm going to keep coming back to is like the Orioles just didn't see him as part of their future plans.
Yeah.
And you talk about what the Orioles have been doing this entire offseason, aside from the baseball aspect, them as an organization are cutting costs. Let's just be frank about it. They're cutting costs, trying to save money as opposed to spending it, and don't think that they might have big contracts coming down the line. Well, what if in 2 or 3 years they want to extend Trey Mancini and then John Means? Oh, we have this $10 million that we saved from not paying Jonathan Villar for 1 season. Now, 3 years down the line, it's all part of the grand scheme of things. They're looking at this as the big picture. It's nothing against Jonathan Villar. He had a great season here in Baltimore in 2019, but he just wasn't a part of their long-term plans. Like a Trey Mancini probably is, like a John Means probably is. I mean, and again, he didn't come in under this regime. He was under the Buck Showalter and Dan Duquette regime. So, he wasn't handpicked by Mike Elias. He doesn't really feel tied down by him. If you can get something for him, get someone you want in for Jonathan Villar, and then they probably see someone in the minor leagues coming up and filling that spot, that hole that he's going to leave next season.
And that's what it all comes down to is the long-term plan, and they're not just settling to be good.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the whole idea. That was, I think, the biggest flaw of the previous regime is it was a matter of homeostasis. Just kind of stay pretty much where you are and sign some veterans here and there, but ultimately, this current regime is looking to be great down the line. They don't want to be mediocre for several years and hope that they can get lucky one of these years.
Yeah.
They want to be non-competitive now so that they can be great in the future. That, like you said, Bobby, that $10 million might go to a Ryan Mountcastle extension in 4 years.
Yeah.
We have no idea, but it can be used for more important stuff.
Or a Mike Elias and Brendan Hyde extension in a couple. Who knows?
Or $10 million that can go back into the farm system to enhance your analytics approach, or get more. It can be used for any number of things. And handing $10 million to a player that you're almost definitely not going to retain after 2020 and is not going to be with you into his 30s just does not make sense. And who knows if they really love Jonathan Villar again. They can sign him in a year.
Yeah.
They can sign him off the free agent market in a year if they want to retain him. But they got something for him in a year they knew they were not going to be competitive.
Yeah.
That's what it's about.
Right. And another thing too is that fans want to, and Rock addressed this as well because he hears it. Don't think he doesn't.
Yep.
But they're going to want to compare, like, why did they tender a contract to Richard Blyer and not retain Jonathan Villar? Well, you're talking literally $10 million versus less than $1 million.
Yeah.
I mean, Rock said the only comparison is that they were both arbitration eligible. That's it.
Yeah.
MLB trade rumors projected Blyer, to get just a little over $1 million. He settled for under $1 million. So, and he was productive at the second half of the season too, and in a bullpen that struggled mightily for any sort of consistency, effectiveness. We know what Richard Blyer can do. He's got a career ERA hovering around 2. And a left-hander too. He could be a great influence for some of these young lefties in this bullpen, or any arms really. And it's just not a fair comparison because you're again talking $10+ million versus under $1 million. It's just a huge gap and not worth a comparison.
And he won't be an impending free agent.
And this is only right. And this is his first year of arbitration eligibility.
Yeah.
So it's we could do it. Maybe get a little over $1 million next, whatever it may be. But he's starting from the very bottom of this process, where Villar's nearing the end of this process. So it's not a comparison at all.
Yeah, exactly. So that is the thinking behind it.
Yeah.
And
I feel like we're going to be having this conversation around this time of year, next year, the year after, because it's going to be, the Orioles are going to be somewhat of a revolving door for the next couple of seasons, in terms of like veteran players coming in. Yeah. Like we talk about all the time. This is a destination for veterans to come, maybe reestablish themselves or try to get this $10 million, whatever it may be, the next contract, the next 1-year deal, go to a rebuilding team, have a really good season, and then try to get that next deal and then move on. And that's kind of what Villar did. It wasn't really his entire process, under his control because he got traded, but that's basically what happened with him. It could happen down the line with Richard Blyer, other guys that we've talked numerous times about possibly being trade trips down the line.
And it's a very different case than a Trey Mancini,
who is clearly the centerpiece now.
Yeah, at this point. He's their team leader, and he has shown the ability to be a potentially great player for them and is under team control for several more years. Yeah. And Jonathan Villar, over his career, not to take anything away from him, he's been a bit of a journeyman. He's bounced around. He was on the Astros when Mike Elias was as part of that front office. He spent time with the Brewers, and they dealt him away. So it's a very different case. It's comparing apples to oranges to try to say, well, you held on to this guy, why not that guy? Yeah. And you mentioned it with Blyer, and it's true for Mancini as well.
Why can't fruit be compared?
Is that from
Little Dicky?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Hopefully we don't have to bleep that out for his.
It was a clean lyric.
That's his name.
Yeah. That's his name.
It's his name.
R.A. Dickey. We say
R.A. Dickey, that's
true. We say that all the time. Not
that
all the time, but we've said on the program.
I don't know how much we're talking R.A. Dickey.
Yeah.
Wasn't R.A. Dickey the
knuckleballer for the Blue Jays for a long time? Yeah,
and,
I think he was a Cy Young winner too.
Yeah,
at some point.
He had a crazy year in his age 38 season.
I think that was it. Now I'm curious.
I think it was when he was with the Mets, maybe.
Possibly. And he was just. I think he was like. Ooh, this might not be right, but I want to say he was like the first knuckleballer, like true knuckleballer to ever win the Cy Young.
He definitely, He also had the best knuckleball.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, so Cy Young in 2012 with the Mets. That was his,
There we go.
Went
at
20
age
and
37.
6, yep. Went 20-6. I
got to peek over here.
273 ERA. Struck out 230, which led the league.
Wow.
In the National League. That is crazy. Yeah. So R.A. Dickey. We have said the last name Dickey on this program.
All right. Well, let's go from R.A. Dickey to Easton Lucas.
All right. Same guy, right?
Yeah, sure. Who is 23 years old, and he is the guy that the Orioles got back in the Jonathan Villar trade, of course, from the Marlins organization. So he was a draft pick of just 6 months ago, a 14th round pick out of Pepperdine. He played for Single A Batavia, short season, obviously, after he was drafted. And had a sub-4 ERA, 3.98 in 12 games. So not a whole lot of exposure to him, but clearly a guy that Mike Elias recently saw on his draft board, stuck out to him, said maybe, this was a guy we would have wanted to pick around that range or close to it. Just another guy. It's essentially like getting another draft pick from the previous draft.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. Just adding from the last draft, like you said. I mean, I feel like it's happened a couple of times. I know it happened with the Nationals. They traded like one of their top draft picks like the year after, like it was
within months.
The Adam Eaton trade. I think Dan Dunning was that guy. But yeah, adding another draft pick, and this is obviously again following along with the philosophy that the Michael Elias and the Orioles are trying to implement pitchers. They know they need pitching depth in the minor league system. They got really good position player talent that all throughout the system, especially now you add Adley Rutschman to that equation. It's the pitching depth that this organization has suffered for so long now, and that they're trying to influx it with new talent, inject it with new talent. And so Easton Lucas definitely fits that bill, not only because he's a pitcher, but also because he's a southpaw.
Exactly, and there's going to be a lot of great pitching at the lower levels, once again, of the Orioles minor league system, and we could see these guys move up throughout. I'm sure we'll see some promotions coming down the line, especially this year for DL Hall, Grayson Rodriguez. So there's going to be more opportunities for these guys, and these pitching staffs at pretty much every level of the Orioles minor league system is going to be loaded.
Yeah, so this guy's going to probably start at Aberdeen this season, I would assume. Low single short season, single A, maybe.
He might get the bump up
Delmarva.
to Delmarva, maybe even a Frederick, depending. So
yeah,
we'll see.
Along those lines. But yeah, I mean, there's plenty of young talent around there. We've already talked about a couple of times how some of those arms are probably going to start a level up next season. They've earned that after a really good 2019 season. So he's just going to slide in right there where those holes that they're filling in those lower levels and try to do the same thing.
Exactly. All right, so back to the Major League roster because they locked up Richard Blyer, they trade Jonathan Villar, and then there are 5 more guys on the Orioles roster that are headed to arbitration. They are Dylan Bundy, Michael Givens, Miguel Castro, Trey Mancini, and Hanser Alberto. On that list, Bobby, the first couple names really stick out to me as potential trade candidates for this offseason in particular, Dylan Bundy and Michael Givens.
Well, Bundy, we just heard from Michael Elias after the VR trade in his conference call, has said that he's the most popular name that comes up in trade talks when it comes to pitching. There's a market for starting pitching. Some teams looking for a back end starter who they think Dylan Bundy could fill that role. Obviously here he's one of the front end starters. But yeah, $5.7 million projected by MLB Trade Rumors. I think we're going to hear this name throughout the offseason, and especially maybe even next week. That may be when it starts to reach the boiling point. Especially like we just mentioned at the top of the program, the pitchers that are starting to fly off the board.
Yeah.
Just today, teams are starting to move fast, and maybe you get a team that's a little desperate and it's like, we need to lock up a deal for a back end starter now. Let's just go get Bundy or something like that.
Yeah. Well, and now that these guys are flying off the shelves, it might not be a deal that they get done in December. This might be a February deal.
That's true.
Might be, and of course, because they have him under team control, if he starts out the season well, he will always be tradable. So down the line,
right?
Because he has that, the Orioles hold his rights. So, if the deal does not get done, it could get done once the season starts or at some point.
Right, and I think free agency signings will definitely happen first, just because you don't have to give up anything to get him that player. And like you said, a deal can still be made throughout February, throughout spring training in March. Once the season starts, maybe a team suffers an injury in the back end of the rotation or something like that, and they need to act fast and make a desperate move, whatever that may be. You have Dylan Bundy, hopefully, and it was Kevin Gausman that never started strong. He usually starts out pretty strong during the season, so hopefully his numbers, and we're obviously thinking way ahead, but if he gets to that point and he has a strong start, his stock might rise pretty quickly.
Also, you mentioned Kevin Gausman, non-tendered.
Yep.
What a weird career he has had.
Yep, and I saw that he was maybe thinking about moving overseas.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know. Don't quote me on that. I'm not exactly sure where I saw that.
I'm going to tweet that out.
Nope, don't do that.
Bobby Blanco.
Nope.
The other name mentioned there, Michael Givens, as a potential trade piece as well. The only reason I think that this might be an off-season trade potentially is because it's not a terribly deep market in terms of free agent relievers.
Well, we've seen a lot of top names fly off the shelf already.
I feel like the Braves have signed about 18 of them.
Yep. It's about right.
I mean, they signed Will Smith, who was maybe the top reliever on the market.
Definitely was. And then Chris Martin.
Yeah, and then Chris Martin. Beyond that, it's just kind of a grab bag. I mean, it's a Daniel Hudson, it's a Sergio Romo.
Will Harris.
Jake Diekman is off the board. So there's really not a whole lot out there.
Yeah.
And if teams are looking to just get guys in there, that maybe they're not a closer potentially, and I think we saw this year that didn't work out for Michael Givens, but he was still the best reliever that the Orioles had, I think you could say.
Yeah.
And he is still a fine reliever. And last year was a bad year all around in baseball for relief pitching. It was a huge spike in terms of bullpen ERA. So maybe teams are willing to overlook his bad season, or his not bad season, but ERA season.
It's hard not to be attracted to Michael Givens. He's got a strong arm, righty throw. Obviously has issues with command at times, and maybe even fatigue. We talked about how he was so spotty this season. That partially might be because he was used so often. Brandon Hyde had to call upon him so often. But there's good. I think he draws attention, and I'll be interested to see where he I'm looking at a list of relief pitching free agents and where he would rank among these. Either they're ranked by WAR. I'll be interested to see where he would rank among them if he were a free agent, or how his WAR tracks. Because I gotta imagine he's got to be close to the top level. I mean, these WARs aren't particularly too high. I know it's relief pitching, but still.
Yeah, exactly. So another name that could be out there, and there are other guys, I'm sure, as Mike Elias said. He said there are guys on our team that other teams are calling about. There are guys that might be attractive to other teams. So who knows? The deal could get done. We have seen and expect a relatively quiet offseason from the Orioles, but winter meetings, all these guys are in one building with low air circulation in San Diego. So who knows? They might get a deal done.
Yeah, or a new stadium in Texas. Who knows?
Yeah.
Trey Mancini projected to get $5.7 million. A good pay bump for him.
Yeah.
I know fans were happy also to see they were able to tender a contract to Hanser Alberto, fan favorite, coming back now. Another guy that could, I think Orioles fans would like to see him stay for the whole season. How could he not with that smile? But he might also be a guy that emerges as a trade piece. We couldn't really gauge. I feel like we were always teetering back and forth between, he's a valuable trade piece. Maybe not last season. Maybe this season. He now that he's on the people's radar because he was so good throughout the whole season. Maybe, all right, let's see if he can do it again the first half and maybe become a piece.
I think some contending teams might have the idea of let's see if it's not a fluke. Let's see if he can hit 400 against lefties. And maintain that pace. And that could be a similar case with some of the other guys on their roster. So this could be an potentially interesting offseason. But the VR trade, of course, was the news of the week. Bobby, is there anything else you want to get to before we head on down to San Diego?
I don't know. If you haven't, we talked about it last week, but if you haven't already, the winter warm up here at Utah Street, the Saturday after Thanksgiving. I would assume it's close to sold out, if not already.
Well, it's a free event. They're asking for donations.
Okay, is that true?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, never mind. Well, come then. If it's free, then come. It's going to be. They've already got. They kept the lights up above Utah Street. I think it's gonna be real Christmassy, real holiday themed. 50% off at the team store. You'll hear from Mike Elias and Sig Meidel at the event hosted by Rob Long. So if you're not doing anything on a Saturday afternoon, hopefully the weather holds, but come down Utah Street and get your O's feed. And even if you don't, you might be able to see Camden Yards covered in snow. So even if the weather doesn't. Oh my gosh, can the snow hold off until at least we get back? I don't want to get stuck. No, if it true. But if it's going to snow, it might as well snow during Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. Yeah, and all gone by Thursday. BWI shovel all that out and let us land. Because we get in late Thursday night. Yeah, and we get there early on Saturday. It's going to be a long week. Yep. A lot of peppermint mochas for me will get me through this. Hold on, you didn't say it right. It's toasted white chocolate mocha. That's my other one that I have. But I'm going to order that for you 5 times next week. Exactly. It should be a good time. So stay tuned to all of our MASN All Access coverage from San Diego, California next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and, of course, Rule 5 draft on Thursday. Be sure to follow us on the MASN Orioles Facebook page, on the MASN All Access Facebook page, on the MASN Orioles Twitter account, MASN Orioles YouTube account, and, of course, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, SoundCloud, wherever you can find podcasts. You can find the MASN All Access podcast. Rate, subscribe, like, 5 stars, all that good stuff. Leave us a review. Even if it's not nice, I'll look at it and I'll say, huh. We got I think our first hate tweet last week. A hate tweet. Tweet. We did. Someone did not enjoy us, but that's okay. We enjoy doing the program.
Hey, I told my dad to stop tweeting us, so that should change.
That was
not my dad.
Mr. Mancano's burner account.
That just about does it for the MASN All Access Podcast, of course, brought to you by Marymount University. Visit MarymountSaints.com to learn more about our student athletes and programs today. He's Bobby Blanco, at Bobby_Blanco on Twitter. I'm Paul Mancano, at Paul Mancano on Twitter. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week from San Diego.